Good day. This is Bernie Riley at the Center for Research Libraries. Welcome to the CRL Collections Forum. This afternoon we'll have two sessions with a break in between. The first session, Expanding Access to Primary Source Collections and Databases, will go from 1 o'clock Central to about 2:30. During that time we'll entertain questions by phone. Anyone who would like to ask a question, just hit *1 on their phone. That's *1 on your phone, not on your keyboard. So during the second session, we'll start at 2:45 until 4 p.m. That will be about preserving primary source collections and databases. That will cover the recent assessments of Portico and HathiTrust digital repositories, and with a report on CRL tools and data to support print archiving and collection management decisions. During that session, we solicited your questions in advance. As you registered, you were polled for questions that you might want to pose to our guests, Eileen Fenton, John Wilkin, and Amy Kirchhoff from Portico and HathiTrust. So we will be taking chat questions during the course of that session. So again, during session 1, we'll be taking phone questions as well as chat. So *1 on your phone if you want to signal the operator at the time that we invite questions. And then session 2, chat at any time, and we'll be relaying the chat to the person speaking. We ask you to observe these protocols because we have about 230 registrants for these sessions this afternoon. So that will help keep the conversation going. I would like to introduce James Simon, who's Senior Director of CRL International Resources, to introduce the first session.
Good day to everyone, and thank you for your participation today. And as Bernie mentioned, the Afternoon Collections Forum is an opportunity for CRL and its community to interact on a variety of themes. And the first session of today's forum is on the subject of expanding access to primary source collections and databases. This echoes the theme that we introduced last year along the same line. And we're here to provide you a considerable amount of detail and updates on what CRL's been doing and to collect your feedback on the challenges you're facing and what more you'd like to see of CRL. I'd like to introduce just our presenters for this session. As I mentioned, James Simon, Director of International Resources. And I'd also like to introduce Virginia Kerr, who's our Digital Program Manager at CRL, and Mary Wilkie, who's the Member Liaison and Outreach Services Director. The three of us will be occupying your phones for the next 90 minutes to discuss this broad subject. And we certainly just want to reiterate that you are welcome to submit questions via the chat that you see on your screen. And we will be addressing those questions as we can, and certainly towards the end we have at least 15 minutes for discussion. So if it's a question of clarification, we can try to address them in line. But do submit those at any time, especially as they come, because it's a long session. Just briefly, our agenda for the next 90 minutes. We'll be addressing issues relating to primary source content. And as we all know, and as you all know, the patterns of access and uses of primary source content continues to evolve. We recently announced our Primary Source Awards in the morning session, where we discussed and, in fact, celebrated the use of primary source collections by members of the CRL community. And that certainly highlighted how access, research, and teaching have been changing in recent years, especially related to primary source collections. And CRL has likewise evolved in its response to the changing needs of its members. The program will highlight the steps that we've taken over the past year and our next year's directions. In the course of the program, we'll address the scope of CRL's efforts, looking more closely at our purchase programs and licensing activities of late, and discuss some of the current partnerships and future directions of the center. And as we said, we have some time for Q&A. There'll be several motifs we'll return to throughout the 90 minutes, and focusing in on particular areas of primary source materials, in particular areas that have represented strengths of CRL's collections over the 6+ decades of our existence. Those, of course, include news, which encompasses more than just print newspapers, but certainly news of any variety, legal and government publications, legacy collections in agriculture and technology, and in particular serials or serial publications, and other primary source collections, archives, and the like. So to begin, I'd like to just set up the landscape, if you will, of the changes that we've been seeing from our perspective and from what we've heard from our members, the changing needs of our members. And these, of course, I think are familiar to all of you in terms of what you're doing at your institutions, as well as among the consortium that you deal with and the collaborative programs you participate in. But certainly the growing body of material that is being made available online, while certainly good news for the users, represents particular challenges for the libraries, both in terms of the legacy collections that have been digitized by nonprofit or commercial publishers, as well as the growing body of born digital content. Increasingly, the production of evidence has gone virtual, and that's at least mirrored, I suppose, in virtual documentation, even if it's happening in the live world, as we've seen in recent events in Northern Africa and the Middle East. Certainly the news and production of data has gone web first. So looking at the responses that we need to be addressing in the coming years is gaining increasing urgency. Some of the other challenges that we face along the way, though, is the ongoing commercialization of this content, whether it's public domain resources or government publications, or simply materials that have been eagerly pounced upon by some of our esteemed colleagues in the commercial sector. Public-private partnerships is one area that we've worked to address the challenges of access to this, but that comes with certain benefits and drawbacks to it as well, and we wanted to at least address some of that in our discussion here. And what I call, of course, the siloification of resources, the continuing persistence of non-interoperable search and discovery of these accesses continues to vex our users. I've spoken to numerous scholars over the past year which profess sometimes a profound ignorance of the resources that are at their disposal, even within their libraries, despite all of our efforts to promote collaboratively and individually the resources that are at hand. So, of course, some of the commercial platforms are moving towards unified platforms and integrated searching, but those certainly are not cross-searchable across various vendors' platforms as well. So this continues to provide challenges to our institutions. A few case examples I just want to highlight here as evidence of these challenges. Certainly in the area of news, we've seen a burgeoning availability of content both from commercial news and from the non-commercial sector, either through national libraries or through library partnerships. One of the product out there that's up on the screen here is Cengage Gale's News Vault, which is an integrated search service across the various products that Gale has recently unveiled, which includes, of course, the 17th and 18th century Burney collection of newspapers, the 19th century British Library materials, and the 19th century U.S. newspapers. These resources are actively marketed among our institutions, and the 19th century U.S. newspapers is a good case example where they provide primary source newspaper content to the tune of some 300,000 issues. They represent this material as, quote, compelling as it is comprehensive. And I think that we can all recognize sales copy from actual assessments, but we did a quick assessment, and we're looking further into Gale's collections, and we'll be providing some detailed assessment over the course of the year. But just as an example of the kind of assessment we were doing, we took a look at the measurements of the collection down to the issue level, where they were published by state, and overlaid them on a map to see how comprehensive and or compelling the collection was. And this is just a screen grab of a georeferenced map indicating the prevalence of issues. And as you can see here, there is certainly a a nice representation across the country for the 19th century newspapers, but it is frequently concentrated in just a few areas, which often represents the source collections from which they digitize this material. They have digitized from a variety of state archives, historical societies, public libraries, and in a few academic library cases as well. So we'll be providing more data on this kind of a collection as well. By contrast, perhaps in the 19th century, is the Library of Congress and National Endowment for the Humanities effort. As you know, Chronicling America is continuing to move forward and providing a certain amount of transparency to their collections through the API access to their materials and allowing crawlers to search the materials. This might be a model that we can hold up as a potential example against the commercial content. We've also been monitoring other materials that are going on in the external sector. In particular, we've paid close attention to what's happening with the Google News archives. This is Google's effort announced a couple of years ago to digitize past issues of newspapers. Recently, they've enhanced the service by providing a title list, finally, to the news that is represented in their collection, which includes some 2,400 titles and 3.5 million issues. The content that they're drawing from comes from both publishers of the newspapers as well as the historical content provided by ProQuest and Heritage Microfilm, as well as from a few other sources as well. There's not much transparency to this. It's not necessarily geared towards scholars, but it is an openly accessible resource for our users. One of the questions we're continuing to pursue is what future directions this might take. And we've heard recently from a reliable source that Google is discontinuing this project entirely. What the future of access to these newspapers are is still open to question, but we'll continue to monitor this. One other area of news I just want to touch on relates to the British Library's efforts, and they announced last year a new partnership with the Scottish company Bright Solid to engage in a 10-year exclusive contract with that company to digitize up to 40 million pages over a 10-year period. Bright Solid is big in the genealogy market in the UK. It's one of the largest genealogy companies out there. And so they've given up a considerable amount of control, at least temporarily, to the commercial sector to make this happen. Certainly there's great advantage to making this content accessible, but at a cost to researchers. Along the way, and perhaps more concerning, is the overall strategic change in the British Library's services for their newspapers. While they're transferring the print newspapers to a more state-of-the-art facility in Boston Spa, they are no longer serving access to the print materials outside the library. And in fact, they've also seized the microfilm of newspapers from the UK. And they're also temporarily, at least, not duplicating microfilm in order. So this is severely impacting programs like CRL's demand purchase of newspapers because of our inability to acquire this material. The British Library claims to be providing duplication in the future with a third-party source, but there's not much news out there about that. And there's still the open question of what kind of solution they're going to present for the future in terms of digital ingest of newspapers. Another area that CRL is addressing challenges includes the materials in the legal and government sector, government and related publications. And we've been paying a lot of attention recently to legal serials that are being produced by the Law Library Microform Consortium, which we'll talk about later. But certainly there are many competing products out there that our libraries are subscribing to, which includes, of course, Hein Online, which has reportedly some 60 million pages of legal history in their product. And in February, they announced what they're calling their digital ownership program, which provides libraries a hard drive with all of the content to their historical collections if you choose to purchase it. I don't know if anyone at your institutions have looked at this program right now, but it does raise a certain amount of concern in terms of what one could actually do with that digital content. If it's simply handed over to them with absolutely no access rights, it's not much better than a doorstop at this point. So we'd welcome your feedback on that and what you've explored with them. And might it not be better to encourage depositing that material with a third-party trusted archive? A second product, of course, in the legal and government realm is LexisNexis, and as you all recently know, they've engaged in a major shift of a portion of their content to ProQuest, which recently completed the purchase of the Congressional Information Service and UPA product lines from LexisNexis into ProQuest. This has some implications for our libraries, as ProQuest has recently announced two major initiatives to bring a lot of this content online in more accessible formats. The UPA collection, they've planned the History Vault, which intends to bring 23 million pages online of this content, a lot of which we've already purchased in microfilm in the past. So getting some more transparency from the publishers as to what kind of pricing, what kind of access models they're providing is quite important. Third area that we just wanted to briefly touch on before we move forward is on the legacy collections of agricultural and technical serials. You are no doubt familiar with the National Agricultural Library's digital repository, which was brought online a couple of years ago, which contains some 700,000 pages of content from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, including a number of serials. This is a nice asset, and it's a departure from the normal commercial activities that we've seen. There's not a lot of commercial activity with agriculture databases, although certainly journal publications and the like are quickly snapped up by commercial publishers such as Elsevier. Federal support for agricultural research, though, has remained flat for the better part of 15 years, including support for collaborative efforts that have been going on. And so increasingly the burden is being placed on the academic universities and the land-grant universities to support access to this materials. CRL has been working with the U.S. Agricultural Information Network to explore the ramifications of the digital world in the fields of agriculture. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that partnership towards the end of the presentation. But certainly the institutions that are faced with these challenges, including Cornell and University of Arizona and the like, are faced with supporting access to these materials in a way that their scholars need it. One other area in the realm of technical serials is the National Technical Information Service, another government database. NTIS, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is an agency of the Department of Commerce. It's one of the few government agencies that operates on a cost recovery basis and has a rotating fund, so it behaves more like a commercial operation than a government often does, although I'd argue the bureaucracy is almost as Byzantine as our government's. But they're continuing to make the technical and engineering resources produced by the government available for a fee through their National Technical Information Library, which was announced in 2009. A number of you probably have access to that through subscription. The reason I bring this up is that it again serves as something that the libraries should be paying close attention to and having a voice in the direction of the kind of material that is being provided through this. Some recent developments bear watching, or perhaps some community action. For instance, in November, the National Archives, or NARA, announced a partnership with NTIS to ensure long-term preservation and access to the authentication and secured digital technical and engineering information. In effect, NARA has ceded all control of government publications to the NTIS, which in turn makes them available for a fee. So what the implications are for the individual departments that have previously hosted a number of their materials on their sites for free is open for question right now. So it's something that we need more clarification on. They've also recently put up on their site, that is NTIS has recently put up on their site at the end of March, a tender for a potential joint venture relationship that would support a publishing environment for books, reports, and data sets produced by the federal government. In effect, they're looking for commercial partners to help monetize some of this content in ways that will certainly impact our collections. So this is something, again, that I think that we should be drawing attention to and inquiring with a skeptical eye on what kind of plans they have in place for these. So that's just a sort of shot across the bow about the landscape itself. There's growing resources, a diversity of players, tensions between public and private institutions, and a myriad of forms of access to materials, including overlap in databases that a lot of us are subscribing to in multiple copies. We're interested in your insights on these issues and invite you to submit your thoughts via the chat or later on in the discussion. But I think I want to turn it over to say, what is CRL doing about these issues? And certainly we're addressing in coordinated fashion as we can a number of these areas. And Virginia Kerr is going to take over here to present on how CRL is supporting the transition from print to digital and coordinating libraries' efforts. Virginia?
Thanks, James. As CRL continues to work with communities of interest under the Global Resources umbrella to expand digital access to unique primary sources, we expect that just over 4 million pages of new digital content will be made available during our current fiscal year. This has been a particularly productive year as we near completion of 2 major initiatives: the American periodicals from CRL and the initial phase of the World Newspaper Archive. But CRL's involvement in building digital collections also includes a number of collaborative projects executed on a much smaller scale to meet specifically identified research needs. The scale and variety of recent digitization activities, which leverage the strengths of the CRL community, is particularly noteworthy, since, as James has noted, online collections have been trending toward an expanding commercial distribution. To briefly review the status of CRL digitization, I want first to note several open access initiatives fostered by Global Resources affiliated groups. The first of these is TRAIL, Technical Report Archive and Image Library. There are currently over 25 partner institutions working in active collaboration to identify, digitize, and archive federal technical reports issued prior to 1975. TRAIL began operating in 2006 as an initiative in partnership with GWILA, the Greater Western Library Alliance. Administrative support is now through CRL. Selection and cataloging tasks are executed by staff at TRAIL member libraries. Digital production is largely through the Google digitization stream at the University of Michigan. The TRAIL content ranges widely, from space exploration to alternative energy sources. Although many people may assume that the primary use today of this literature would be for studying the history of technology, many reports contain data very relevant to today's problems. And in fact, some experiments could not be duplicated today due to current safety regulations. For example, the TRAIL collection includes early studies on the safe functioning of nuclear power plants. One report was accessed over 40 times in 30 days during the recent Japanese nuclear power plant crisis. Currently, over 20,000 documents, or 2 million pages, are available in the TRAIL collection. These are available in page image format with searchable metadata, and there is a new search interface available which integrates the content from several platforms, with the majority of the content being housed at HathiTrust. Future TRAIL content will include energy exploration reports issued after the 1973 oil crisis and documents from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, as well as coordinating content, legacy content with the NTIS database. The TRAIL collection represents significant legacy documentation, which previously had only fugitive access. And we're encouraging wider participation to protect this at-risk material. You can contact James Simon for more information on how to join TRAIL. An additional initiative under the Global Resources umbrella of activities is the Digital South Asia Library, or DSAL. Several projects are represented in this initiative, with all of the content available through open access. The DSAL projects are funded in part through the U.S. Department of Education TIC-FIA grants, using technology for preservation and access to resources from various world regions. CRL supports the digital initiative in collaboration with the University of Chicago and regional partners. And recent projects have included the digitization of gramophone recordings, supplementing the Linguistic Survey of India from 1913 to 1929. The South Asia Union Catalog also has been expanded under DSAL's oversight for areas including Afghanistan, India, Pakistan, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. New TIC-FIA grants have recently been awarded to DSAL, which will include the identification and digitization of additional audio recordings, maps, and images. And here I show some postcards from a personal collection of the former head of the Asia, Pacific, and Africa collections at the British Library. Among other global resources projects, affiliate interest groups within the Area Microform Project initiatives are planning several specialized collaborative digitization efforts to leverage access to research resources. These include the Kabarole District Archives Project in Uganda, which is helping to fund digitization of local government archival materials dating from 1910 to 1970, including legal procedures and election records. This project is expected to be completed in 2012. And SEEMP, the Slavic and East European Microform Project, plans to microfilm and digitize periodical titles published by Ukrainian political and intellectual immigrant groups dating from the period 1945 to 1954. Delivering important content from CRL's own collections in electronic format has been a key strategy for increasing access to digital primary sources for CRL libraries. This has taken several approaches, and I'm sure that most of you are familiar by now with the World Newspaper Archive, a partnership with REDX, a division of Newsbank, to preserve and provide persistent access to historical newspapers from various world regions. This is a member-supported project. There have been nearly 60 charter supporters since its inception in 2008 who've made significant investments in the digital costs, and many more CRL libraries have subscribed at favorable rates. This project gives an opportunity for greater voice of CRL libraries concerning which historical papers are being digitized. An advisory group has prioritized titles not likely to be included in other databases, and the source content of microfilm comes from holdings not widely held at CRL and a few CRL libraries. And CRL has archived the microfilm for all the titles. Currently, only pre-1922 content is available for the WNA, but based on feedback from CRL libraries, we are urging Newsbank to pursue rights to add more recently published content. And here I'm just illustrating from the 3 modules which are currently available on Latin America, Africa, and South Asia. And the East European module is in progress with a launch expected in March of 2012. CRL has taken a different approach with our significant holdings of historical American trade and technical periodicals, many of which had deteriorated to the point where they could not be circulated. This project is a partnership with ProQuest to extend access to this content. We're now close to reaching the project goal of 3 million pages, expected to be completed later this year. Topics include patents, agriculture, photography, commerce, and telecommunications. And this year, a significant achievement was gap filling through contributions through volumes identified at the University of Pennsylvania Library, which added over 200,000 pages, particularly covering topics in construction and railway development. And we're very grateful to Penn's library for that assistance. CRL is archiving the bound volumes for the APCRL collection. And I'd just like to remind you that digital interlibrary loan is available for articles or full volumes for those for scholars at those CRL libraries which have not purchased APCRL. And finally, last but not least, I'd like to mention the in-house digitization efforts at CRL, begun in 2007 as a response to scholars' evolving preference for online resources. Currently, there are over 15,000 titles in 3 million pages available. Most of this content is produced as digital delivery, that is, it's scanned in response to requests for loan. But the files are retained and linked from catalog records. As you can see here, or I don't know if you can read it or not, but in this catalog record in the upper right-hand corner, there's a link to the PDF file. These materials are not all public domain materials, but they are made available on IP-restricted access to CRL libraries based on fair use principles. This summarizes the status of efforts to digitize specialized primary resource content at CRL and collaborating institutions. I will be happy to answer questions during our Q&A period at the end of the session. Right now, I would like to turn it over to Mary Wilkie, who will address how CRL is supporting expanded access to third-party content as an extension of our collections building programs.
Hi, this is Mary Wilkie. CRL traditional purchase programs still play a role in providing access to important primary source materials. Through these programs, members identify resources for CRL to acquire. I want to briefly review what CRL has done this past year in our historical programs before I go on to our efforts in electronic licensing. Access to primary source materials has always been a key to CRL's mission, and through the Purchase Proposal Program, CRL provides access to important collections which may be too costly or too esoteric for individual institutions to acquire. Here you see two of the items purchased as a result of this year's ballot. CRL was able to acquire 9 items with a total list price of over $150,000. The full list of items purchased can be found on the page on our website for the Purchase Proposal Program. I want to thank all the libraries who nominated items for the ballot this past fall. Member participation is key to CRL's strength, and we rely on your knowledge and expertise. You are the ones who identify important primary source materials. You are the ones who nominate the works, and you are the ones that vote on the resources. Nominations are open for next fall's purchase proposal ballot. Collection contacts at member institutions have been sent the information. If you have a question about this, please let me know later on. Our shared purchase program recently ended, and I'm very pleased to say all 5 items are being purchased. CRL wishes to especially thank those members who were able to contribute funds towards these purchases. Recent economic times make their support all the more important in this voluntary program. The entire CRL community benefits from this. Before moving on to our recent efforts with electronic licensing, I want to quickly review the path traveled in recent years. After continuing to hear from our members that they wished CRL to become involved with licensing major primary source databases, CRL surveyed member interest on the purchase proposal ballot in the fiscal year 2010. 2 important databases rose to the top, with our members indicating strong interest. At last year's annual meeting, I was able to report offers from both publishers had been made and were opened until the end of May 2010. Uptake on both items was very successful, even though both products had been on the market for some time. Whether or not a member took advantage of those offers, CRL received a clear, positive message from our members affirming that you wished us to continue to explore future possible opportunities. So on the purchase proposal ballot last November, we presented 3 firm offers for electronic resources for the things you see on this slide. Part of CRL's process is to help inform your collection decision. So along with the offers, CRL made available analysis in the form of global resources reviews, which Virginia Kerr will talk more about later. 2 out of the 3 firms had a very successful uptake, with the third one having a modest uptake. In addition to the 3 firm offers last fall, CRL surveyed member interest for an additional 6 other titles. The 5 titles you see here on this slide are the ones which had strong member interest. CRL negotiated offers for these and then presented the offers to the membership after ALA midwinter. The offers for British Records on the Atlantic World and the one for Social Explorer are closed now, but the remaining 3 titles are still open. Uptake and feedback has been positive, and if you are interested in the open offers for Foreign Office Files for China, India, Raj and Empire, or Sabin Americana, I would like to remind you to contact the vendors. While exploring electronic licensing, it made sense for us to use the framework of the purchase proposal ballot to test the waters. However, our exploration made some things obvious. CRL should focus on the areas in which we have strength: archives, newspapers, along with the social sciences and humanities. We will, of course, continue to listen to member suggestions for which there is strong support. We will also continue to coordinate with other licensing bodies when mutually beneficial. CRL will integrate these activities with the Global Resources Forum, where we will share critical information about online primary source databases. Virginia Kerr will talk more about this shortly. Licensing will be separated from the purchase proposal ballot. Our exploration made it obvious that institutions needed a different time frame to act on electronic offers, as the processes for members to approve them differs greatly than the process for members voting on the purchase proposal ballot. To this effect, CRL sees offering licensing opportunities at least twice a year. We do intend to remain flexible in order to respond quickly to time-sensitive opportunities. Next, we move on to current partnerships and future directions. Besides our role with licensing, CRL is engaging in synergy partnerships which will allow our members to have more input on content development and or help expand access. One example is the Electronic Thesis Online Service, or ETHOS. After decades of purchasing dissertations from UK universities, CRL is now working with the British Library to provide web access to dissertations and theses through the ETHOS database. ETHOS offers a single point of access to theses produced by participating UK higher education institutions. They have over 250,000 works in their database, and new records are being added weekly. However, if the desired work is not yet in the database, a fee is required. As CRL is permitted to place orders and to alert patrons when a dissertation is available for personal download, CRL will pay the initial cost of works not yet scanned, which have been requested by patrons at our member institutions through our demand purchase program for doctoral dissertations. Besides this new direction for our traditional demand purchase program, CRL worked with the British Library last year to fund the digitization of 400 dissertations focused on the Middle East, the Persian Gulf, and/or Islam. Current efforts include our partnership with the Law Library Microform Consortium, or LLMC, by working with a joint steering committee to prioritize selections for digitization. The CRL community will benefit from an expanded amount of international content in this resource. A notable example of new international material in the LLMC database is the recent Haiti Legal Patrimony Project, a collaborative effort to create a comprehensive digital collection to take the place of items lost in last year's earthquake. Additionally, LMMC will be scanning over 1 million pages of relevant legal material from CRL's own collections this year. The full database has at this time has over 20 million pages of content and is available to all CRL libraries during this first year of the partnership. Later this year, CRL will be sending out more information about equitable cost-sharing options for ongoing subscriptions to the LLMC database. We will continue to expand and explore partnerships. One such resource is the Inter-University Consortium for Political and Social Research, or ICPSR. Libraries who do not presently have access to this aggregator of data and services have asked us to explore possibilities. Later this year, CRL will hold a teleconference on this where we will welcome your feedback and questions. These teleconferences, along with product reviews, vendor assessment, fall under the umbrella of the Global Resource Forum, which I'm happy to say Virginia will now talk about.
Thank you, Mary. At last year's annual council, we introduced plans for the Global Resources Forum, a framework of activity resources logically emerging from longstanding CRL cooperative collection development efforts, including the area microform projects, global resources projects, and purchase programs. The forum is envisioned as a way to foster the exchange of community knowledge and expertise in order to strengthen decision-making on collection investments in management at CRL libraries. We have now launched a special portion of our website dedicated to the forum and its information sharing tools. And you will be able to find this section of our site. There is a tab right at the high level of our site to the forum. I would like to mention that I'm just going to be showing screen grabs from sections of the Global Resources Forum section of our website this afternoon. But I encourage you to explore this content live online as soon as possible. Everyone should go there right after this webinar. The strength of the forum will come from your comments, suggestions, and writings generated within the CRL community. So please do start checking out what's there. And I also want to thank those individuals at CRL libraries who have already written up content for the forum, as well as a focus group selected from 4 CRL libraries who gave us very helpful feedback in the planning stages. The major components of the forum include reviews, profiles, topic guides, and data and tools, as well as specialized webinars and teleconferences. James and Mary have already noted how the forum provides additional information on the collection building topics they have introduced. These pages include reviews of all the third-party databases offered to CRL libraries for licensing during this past year, and future reviews will include several of the items that James has mentioned, for instance, Gale's News Vault and the outcomes of the Google News Archive resource, which apparently has been recently discontinued. Profiles of digital repositories and aggregators are included, such as the firm James mentioned, which has been contracted to scan newspapers for the British Library. And topic guides reflect current priorities and challenges in collection building. Now, just again, I apologize that these are screen grabs. They'll just give you a little hint of what's there live online. But looking at the first page of a review, which is now posted there, the reviews are intended to contain timely and updated information, including whatever pre-release details we can obtain for pending digital collections. Resources to be reviewed will represent the priority collecting areas for the CRL community, including all the databases, as I mentioned, for which we will be investigating licensing. There is a form on the main landing page for reviews, which will allow you to suggest items to be reviewed, and we hope that this form will also be helpful in recruiting volunteers to write reviews. We've already obtained critical assessments from members for the current reviews which are posted, including 4 bibliographers at the University of North Carolina who contributed to this review that I'm showing of the resource, The Foreign Office Files on China, from Adam Matthew Publishers. These reviews can be a powerful tool to leverage information gained from local trial assessments of databases in CRL libraries. Although the timing of purchase decisions differs at each institution, we expect to maintain and add to the information in these reviews. A feedback form, and I don't know if you can see the green button there in the upper right-hand corner, the feedback form button, will allow the ongoing integration of observations on the resources being reviewed, including comments on use cases and user satisfaction. The reviews will include technical specifications and information obtained directly from the publishers, not posted publicly. We also cite other reviews, including those in the Charleston Advisor, which I would like to remind you is still made available to all CRL libraries. Profiles are independent assessments of major electronic publishers and aggregators, repositories, and other service providers, often growing out of the certification activities conducted by CRL to protect the investment of our members in their products and services. The profiles document the history, governance, business practices, preservation strategies, and technical capabilities of the organizations. You will find here currently profiles of the repositories featured in the second session today on digital archiving, Portico and HathiTrust, as well as a profile on the UMI division of ProQuest. And I think I mentioned already a short profile is mounted there on BrightSolid, the firm that has contracted to scan the newspaper collection at the British Library. For some time, CRL has issued topic guides to our collections, which are especially useful in pointing out the range of content contained in large microform sets. Newer topic guides, developed under the Global Resources Forum framework, will include discussion of the challenges faced today in collections building on various topics and genres of material. Topic guides are developed in conjunction with the subject-oriented collections webinars, which CRL offers quarterly. Upcoming webinars are listed on our website and in Connect, our electronic newsletter. The next subject webinar will be on news preservation and access on July 13th, where James will expand on some of the developments noted today. And I'd like to just mention the other topic guides, the new topic guides that we have featured in addition to one on Africa. There's one on human rights documentation. There's a topic guide on medieval studies based on a webinar which Mary gave in March. And we had contributions to the topic guide from staff at several CRL libraries. The fourth component, falling within the forum's framework of activities and information, is a category called data and tools, which will support collection management decisions. The resource currently linked here is the prototype database for the Print Archive and Preservation Registry, also known as PAPR, or PAPER.
Hi, this is James. I'm just going to jump in here to talk a little bit more about the fourth pillar, if you will, of the forum. Maybe we'll form a peristyle before the end of this. But data and tools. Certainly, CRL has been working over the past several years to support collection management decisions, which include, of course, acquisition, retention, preservation, and digitization of content. All of these permeate the various activities at CRL, and we're putting them in a place that they're easy to find and easy to use. We're actually providing an amount of data that heretofore has been unavailable to libraries for assessment, and layering tools on top of those that members can use to make collection decisions at their own institutions. As Virginia mentioned, the Print Archives Registry was introduced last year at the Annual Council Forum by Lizanne Payne, and we hope that you found it interesting and of good use. I mentioned that it was a prototype at the time. It's been continued to be updated and maintained, and we're working on a more robust paper registry that Bernie mentioned this morning in his president's report during the business session. That will be actually put online in the next week. And it'll also be featured, I think, in the second session of this afternoon's forum as well. Thanks, Bernie. Yeah, and we encourage you to stay on the line for that, by the way. Thanks for bearing with us. But so that is what's currently available up there, and I just wanted to mention a couple other tools in the works over the next year. One of the activities that we're engaged in is the result of a successful grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services under the National Leadership Grants Program. And this was the project's entitled Cooperative Print Archiving by Discipline, Developing an Infrastructure to Sustain Scholarly Resources. This really has grown out of the work over the past several years on print archiving, both in terms of CRL's own print archiving activities and its efforts to form an international coalition that is working on print archiving locally or cooperatively. In the course of the discussions among the participants in those, it became clear that the most successful collaborative programs were those that were formed and maintained by communities that had a long-standing interest in collaboration and a history of cooperation through collaborative programs. And in particular, we heard from two groups that were exploring these topics, and we thought it useful to bring them together through one of the national leadership grants to further describe their activities. So we're working in two particular domains through the course of this 2-year program, both with law and with agriculture. To mitigate the high costs of storing and maintaining these collections, we're partnering with the Law Library Microform Consortium on the legal side and the U.S. Agricultural Information Network on the agricultural side to build a sustainable plan for the cooperative management of legacy print materials. This is a consensus-building effort by which we're bringing these communities together to share information, to aggregate data, and to develop a model for the sustainable base of support for cooperative print archiving, both at the national and at the international level for these. So we're focusing on well-defined bodies within these communities. As you know, the LLMC partnership with CRL has given us a lot of data about the materials that they have microfilmed or microfiched for decades and now are making accessible in digital format. We are aggregating the data that they're providing in terms of what content they've been scanning, and also what efforts they've been doing among their community on print archiving. There's a lot of materials that has been made digitally accessible in previous products that we've described, such as Heinonline, that institutions are increasingly feeling the pinch of storage and cost management of those materials. So we're looking at the archival conditions necessary for the community to put these together into a cooperative print archive. Along the way, we'll be assembling the supporting information base, which is how it comes back to these tools and data, that will provide holdings information that will be enough information to help validate archives in a centralized database. We'll also be working closely with the community members to document the baseline archival conditions of the materials, how they're being stored, what access conditions there are to them, and the like. And all of this will be put together in a robust information base for other libraries to consider and use, as well as developing the templates and models for service agreements that can be used in other products. A second project I want to describe here is the ICON Global Newspaper Directory. As you all know, we've been longtime supporters of the International Coalition on Newspapers, which was truly an international cooperative body focused on preservation, bibliographic access, and now increasingly digital access to newspapers. Through another national leadership grant, CRL has working with a number of library and publisher partners to coordinate and provide access to metadata on historic newspapers and their digital versions. This really is kind of the next generation ICON database. The Global Newspaper Directory will form a foundation for a comprehensive registry of newspapers published globally, which will include U.S. newspapers. And it will integrate information on newspapers from, as I said, a variety of sources, which would include both the Library of Congress and the NDNP, as well as CRL's own coordinated efforts, such as the World Newspaper Archive, and the records of various commercial partners as well, including Redex's other products as well. The database will combine bibliographic entries along with holdings information and granular metadata about, hopefully down to the issue level, about the holdings in digital products. This data can be used to provide information not only about what's already been done, but overlap with print collections so that institutions can make local decisions on whether or not to acquire a database, to store their print copies in long-term storage, to microfilm that material, or to engage in their own digital products. We'd like to thank the Institute of Museum and Library Services for their significant support on this, which is also being augmented by support from CRL, as well as the American Antiquarian Society. Just on the subject of news, as well as on data, I wanted to just mention something that Bernie brought up this morning in the business session, for those of you who weren't in attendance. Another significant activity we've accomplished this year is a detailed assessment on the state of newspaper publishing with an eye towards born digital news and looking closely at the implications of web-first news publications. This came out of a discussion that was begun in 2009 under the NDIP project, by which the Library of Congress convened a variety of librarians, publishers, data providers, and other stakeholders to examine the implications of deposit of electronic newspapers. It became clear at that conference that more detail was necessary in order to explore how to receive, deposit, adequately retain for long-term retention and access electronic news. CRL proposed to the Library of Congress's Office of Strategic Initiatives, who approved this report, by which CRL did an assessment on the life cycle of news production as it stands today. We've we've this will be put up on the web in the next few weeks, but briefly described, what we did was to examine the current production processes of news organizations, from the of articles through the distribution via online channels as well as in their print production networks. We used 4 newspapers as a case study, as well as augmented by other case studies of other newspapers. This will all be detailed in the report, but what we looked to do was to figure out both at what points in the production process are the electronic news being generated, how are they being stored, what kind of metadata is attached to them, how is that metadata carried through the production process, and who's doing what with that kind of data. All of this is really, in the end, towards the solutions that the Library of Congress and other organizations are seeking about long-term, in fact, legal deposit of electronic news. Some of the findings were quite interesting, and we'll be covering them in more detail in a report to the Collection Development Office, as well as in the webinar that we've promised in July on news. Go to our website to sign up for that one. It's going to be a rocking good time. But for instance, some of the things we looked at were the production of the PDFs that are sent to the plate setters for printing, which are at the same time dropped for pickup by the aggregators such as Press Display. Is this in fact a point in the stream that we can be picking up PDF content for long-term storage, and looking at some of the implications of that? Certainly that is one option, is the closest representation to the print newspaper without actually touching print itself. But there are advantages and disadvantages to that as well. For one thing, the PDF representation of news is by no means it represents only a fraction of the news that's being produced right now. Since news organizations are increasingly turning to the web to present breaking news, ongoing news throughout the day, and using their print for, in effect, commentary and sort of a sum up of what had happened over the course of the previous day, there's a lot of news in between each publication that is being missed. Whereas if one chooses to archive the website, certainly web archiving as it stands today is not sufficient to grab the variety of permutations of the news that you see on their websites. Not only is it produced in a constantly streaming format, it is increasingly being aggregated from other sources that exist completely outside of the news organization. Many organizations don't even see the stock quotes touch their desks, or for that matter, AP newswires. These show up on their site produced from a third-party provider, and are not actually owned nor held by the publishers. So there's a lot of complications to this, and the report really goes into detail as part of the solution to looking at preservation of born digital newspapers. I just wanted to, before I conclude, there was a comment on the chat line that seemed to suggest that the paper database that I was describing, the new version of the paper database, was going to be imminently available. That's actually not correct, but it will be made available in the course of the next year or so as the grant progresses, and it'll just be the first phase of that database that we'll be putting up, and we'll be working towards that as time goes on. So thank you for that question. But certainly the prototype is available right now off of the Global Resources Forum website. So to wrap up, we've attempted to describe, and hopefully have done a good job of describing, the various ways that we're expanding access to electronic primary source materials. Broadly speaking, we've been pursuing 2 goals aggressively over the past few years, and will continue to do so into 2012. And those 2 areas of our strategic interests are increasing access to primary source collections in electronic format. And as you've heard here, we've been doing that in several ways. One, ongoing digitization of collections in-house, and large-scale digitization of portions of our collections through partnerships. Another way we're doing that is by licensing and promoting electronic access to electronic collections that are held by third parties. And looking thirdly at broader collection development partnerships with partners such as the Law Library Microform Consortium or the Ethos database of the British Library. The second area through which we're pursuing increased access to electronic resources is supporting collection development at your institutions. We're doing that, again, in several ways. One, by promoting the Global Resources Forum, which has a variety of information for you to use in considering licensing, digitization, et cetera, providing the data sets and tools layered on top of those that will support your collection decisions, and building consensus on important efforts such as print archiving or collaborative digitization. Through the webinars and the forum, the roundtables, and other live events such as workshops, we're exploring the broader trends of collections in the digital age and focusing on the emerging trends and challenges, and sharing that back with the community with an aim towards developing an action agenda, a common action agenda among our institutions. So how we've been pursuing these goals, through leveraging our partner strategy, we are able to push these issues further and faster than we can do on our own. Our partners include, of course, the digital platforms and production workflows of commercial or semi-commercial organizations or other consortiums such as the Law Library Microform Consortium. And in fact, partners such as your institutions who are working with us collaboratively to digitize materials. As Virginia mentioned with the Trail Project, we're relying very heavily on the production flows of the University of Michigan and the University of North Texas, and hosting the Common Portal, in fact, at a third institution as well. So it's through these network of partnerships that we can leverage the collective strength of our institutions to provide electronic access. The second way that we're pursuing this, again, is fostering the exchange of community knowledge and expertise. Through the work of your institutions in providing access to materials, sharing information in your subject guides at our live meetings, through the webinars that we conduct and live events such as this one. We're connecting members to resources and promoting and celebrating the collective work of our institutions. We could not do what we do without your expertise, and we hope that we're providing the service that you have come to expect of us, and we continue to seek your active engagement and feedback on this. As the overall theme of today's sessions is continuity, I hope that you can see that the activities that we're pursuing today are very much an extension of the collaboration CRL has pursued over the past 62 years, and all with an aim of increasing the amount of collections that your scholars and patrons can have access to. So, with that, we're going to move to an open discussion and cross our fingers that this is going to work at the same time. As a reminder to those who are out there, if you want to chat live via the phone, you can press *1 on your telephone keypad, and the operator will assist you with that. We're also accepting chats and comments via the chat line, and I did want to just open up with one of the chats that received along the way, related to the World Newspaper Archive and future accessibility. The WNA Advisory Committee is comprised of a variety of collection development officers, subject specialists, and other representatives of our institutions. They'll be meeting this spring by phone to discuss a long-range plan for the World Newspaper Archive. As Virginia mentioned, we have 3 modules up and running right now that represent more than 1.5 million pages of content, and we're continuing to produce that material as well. The advisory committee will be charged to focus very broadly on the interests of the community, to look at both access to additional world regions or additional time periods, and we'll also be looking at broader partnerships to hopefully expand access to content that is not held by our partner institutions. For instance, what is the British Library doing with its non-UK newspapers? Is this an area that will explore access in partnership with them, or perhaps in some form of exchange for access to the materials that they're making accessible to people at their institutions? I hope that answered that question. Virginia, did you have a question?
Do I have a question?
No, did you receive a question?
I can respond to a question on how to access CRL digital content from the projects which I mentioned. And there are several modes, but for all of the digitized material made directly from CRL-held collections, first of all, the in-house scans, the digital production, all of that is listed in the CRL catalog, and in fact the PDFs are linked directly from the CRL catalog. The World Newspaper Archive and the American periodicals from CRL, all of those titles, we've updated our cataloging to reflect the electronic version of those materials. And these records are not only in CRL's online catalog, and those records are available for loading as well, if you'd like to speak with Amy Wood, our head of technical services, but the records are also available in WorldCat. For the other distinctive digital collections from other sources, which I mentioned, those having their own interfaces, their own particular interfaces, they are all listed and linked from a page on our website called Digital Collections. This includes the DSAL, or Digital South Asia Libraries, and there will soon be a link to that Trail interface from our list of digital collections. The Trail content is also listed in WorldCat. We also had a question about how authentication is handled for CRL-hosted material. I mentioned that some of that is access restricted because of the copyright restrictions on the original sources. So just a quick answer is that that is an IP-verified authentication, and you would need to configure your local proxy servers to handle that, and our system staff can work with you on that.
Other live questions from the audience at this point?
I received one question regarding purchase proposal nominations and electronic resources. You can please nominate them as you have done in the past year through the nomination form.
I have a question submitted online from one of our partners who was asking a question about long-term storage, which I'm presuming to mean a little bit about print archiving. But let me address this first in terms of the long-term storage of some of our digital initiatives. The question was related to, does long-term storage also equate to dark archiving of the content? Certainly the long-term storage of our traditional materials, such as the microforms that go into the World Newspaper Archive, will be at CRL for the indefinite future. And as that goes the same for all of the other content that we're working with in the print realm. With the AP CRL project, all of the print materials are being retained here at the center. And access to those will not be a dark archive, but certainly we are reducing the impact on the print collections by loaning the electronic materials as well. Long-term storage for some of our partner projects continues to be something we're exploring, but the print archiving programs that we have been engaging in with the Law Library Microform Consortium and the like does involve a consistently robust dark storage activity where they're sending the print materials to a facility where they are kept in non-accessible format unless there's a significant reason that we need to go back to those collections. Yeah, it's a climate-controlled facility that's in a secret bunker somewhere that you can never find again. I think some of the broader issues about the long-term storage of dark archiving is related to the collective will of some of our institutions to fund these kind of projects. And this is a large challenge that we have been addressing at some length along the lines of our cooperative print archiving agreements. Over the past year or two, we've been convening a variety of the consortial partners that are focused on print archiving to look at both the storage agreements, the cost models, and some of the sustainability. The IMLS projects that we have recently received funding for focus on sustainability in the sense of establishing the community norms for affordable and appropriate archiving. That is, we're looking at the instances that are best practices for this, and we're looking for consensus from these groups so that we can turn it into a national and an international de facto standard for print archiving that can be funded and supported. Bernie, do you have more to add to that?
Yeah, the issue of sustainability is a really important one, obviously, to all of us in this business. What we're looking at with the IMLS projects in two broad fields, agriculture and law, is the current archiving that's being done, and as the basis for creating community consensus on what ought to be done and what can be done. The resources available for collections, the resources available for libraries in the higher education field in general in the next few years are going to be probably at best flat, so that we really can't come up with unrealistic expectations for archiving. It's very important that we establish consensus on the on what should be done and then what can be done realistically. I think that the pooling of expertise will help make this more affordable. Also, the pooling of resources, whether those resources be space or actually holdings of particular kinds of materials, is going to be very important to making it sustainable. There's a question also mentioned about JSTOR. Reminder that that CRL did establish a JSTOR archive, a print archive in 2001, and that has been maintained by CRL consistently, and actually has been growing for years since we did establish that, and that's keeping pace pretty closely with the expansion of JSTOR content. We don't know. One question was how many ARL libraries have withdrawn JSTOR volumes. We know the anecdotal information is that at the beginning of our work on the JSTOR archive, we were getting contributions of JSTOR print by very small libraries, by mostly four-year liberal arts college libraries. But within the past 3 years, we are getting content, JSTOR print from much bigger libraries. The University of Arizona and Northwestern University in particular, are two examples of institutions that have been divesting of at least enough copies of JSTOR to help populate the CRL repository.
Our JSTOR archive here continues to grow, and we give regular reports on the comprehensiveness of that. We're continuing to solicit deposits from you, in effect, to continue to populate the JSTOR archive. As that continues to grow and as the moving wall moves forward, we continue to supply the JSTOR archive. It's not, that particular archive is not completely dark. In fact, we will loan the materials to the members that request it for particular reasons. I think the community consensus about dark archiving, and I credit Lizanne Payne for helping tip me off on this, is that dark archiving is not, it's a very challenging proposition for institutions to support, and that the community consensus to date is that they don't want to move to a fully dark archive, but certainly we are, those archives are fairly heavily restricted or protected, to limit them to specific requests for the physical material for particular reason.
We had one question about the digital resources listed on our digital collections page. which ones are openly accessible to CRL libraries, how we differentiate those from subscription materials. Actually, of all those resources, the only ones that are subscription materials at this point, licensed or subscription materials, are the American periodicals from CRL, distributed through ProQuest, and the WNA, distributed through Newsbank. We talked about putting, we'll look at, again, at the layout of that page about putting some sort of symbol indicating that they are by subscription. What we do right now is that we link to an About page, which does indicate the various terms of access for those materials. And also, if you were to find through our catalog or WorldCat an individual title in those collections, of course, your user would reach an authentication request if they were not a subscriber. But thank you for the suggestion about putting symbols in there about indicating the level of access. All the rest of the things listed on the digital collections page are open and accessible to open content available.
I would like to point out, though, that with the APCRL, for those who don't subscribe, we do and can fill interlibrary loan requests digitally.
Are there any additional questions?
We have no phone questions at this time.
It's the silent majority, which is perfectly acceptable. I think that we've had a lot of productive discussion here. And in fact, we based our presentation on a lot of suggestions from our members as to what they wanted to know more about. It's a good opportunity, I think, for us to be able to expand at some length about the projects that we're undertaking, and to check in with you to make sure that we're meeting your expectations. I'm welcoming additional. Yeah, we'll welcome additional questions or comments here as we have a couple of minutes left. But
we do have a question on the phones.
Very good. Please go ahead.
Okay, we'll take that question from.
This is the University of Florida, Richard Phillips. How are new titles determined for addition to the World Newspaper Archive?
It's a great question, Richard, and nice to hear from the warmer states. It's still cold up here in Chicago. It's still cold in Chicago. The title by title, we've cast an invitation very broadly to our members, looking for particular interest, whether it's from the scholars or from the libraries themselves. Most of our collection is drawn from the materials that we, as a collective group, that is, we of all CRL institutions, have acquired or preserved in microfilm over time, and we've received a number of a lot of feedback from our members expressing interest in particular titles. And we feed those into the queue that we then use for vetting by the advisory committee. One way to do this is either send the comments or recommendations directly to me or to any of the advisory committee members of the World Newspaper Archive. That's up on the website for CRL's website for the WNA, but it includes Adan Benavid, University of Texas, Sharon Farb at UCLA, Dan Hazen at Harvard, Denise Hibbe at New York Public Library, and a couple of that are there. In fact, we're looking to reinvigorate that group as we've had a couple retirements. But Chuck Ekman is another one, I think, and we're also inviting specific comments to be fed to them as well. Good. Well, we have the second part of the forum will be coming up at 2:45. That will be devoted to specifically to the looking at preservation of digital collections, and it's actually going to be a very interesting format where our certification advisory panel, one of the members will be taking questions from and having conversations with a variety of different commercial and non-commercial partners on this to explore these issues in some depth. It's going to be an interactive session, and we look forward to your continued participation on that. just if you need our contact information, it's here on the screen. Mary, Virginia, and I are always eager to talk with our members or to receive your emails as you go. And please do email us or give us a call. All of the CRL's contact information is on the website. Just so you know, this session, as well as the next session, are going to be archived as recorded presentations, and we'll be putting them up on CRL's page, as well as CRL's YouTube channel, which aggregates a number of our previous presentations. That includes both the subject webinars that we've given in the past, general collections and access webinars that serve as orientation sessions, and we encourage you to go visit that and point people to those. So the second session will begin at 2:45. If you would like to hang on the phone until then, that's fine. But you may also choose to hang up and take a break yourself and dial back in say 10 minutes or so. It's the same phone line and the same access code. In fact, the webinar screens here will remain online, and we encourage you to continue to submit any questions or feedback that you have to us during the course of that. So thanks again for your participation in this session, and we are happy to welcome you to the second session in about 15 minutes.